Welcome to the First Time Facilitator podcast. Whether you're a first-time facilitator or a seasoned pro, listen in for tips and tricks to make a bigger impact at the next workshop you deliver. And now, your host. If given the choice between eating sweet or savoury for the rest of her life, she'd choose savoury, Leanne Hughes.
Hello and welcome to the show. I'm your host, Leanne Hughes, and I'm here to help you develop and deliver workshops that kill. This show is proudly sponsored by my newsletter called The Flip Chart, where I share all of my favourite facilitator hacks, productivity tips, and apps that I'm geeking out on every month. You can sign up for The Flip Chart at firsttimefacilitator.com. I'd like to introduce you to today's guest. Her name is Mel Kettle. Mel and I met at a Thought Leaders event in Brisbane earlier this year, and I could actually talk to her for hours. She's very easy to talk to, which is helpful because the work that she focuses on is all about connection. So Mel is a communication and engagement expert, speaker, author, facilitator, trainer, and mentor. Over the last 20-ish years, she has found that one of the biggest challenges organizations face is how to communicate and engage effectively so they attract, engage, and retain other humans, whether that's staff, customers, members, sponsors, board members, or others. So that's where Mel can come in. She helps your organisation communicate and engage more effectively and authentically so that people will want to work with you. Mel mostly works with for-purpose organisations with the occasional for-profit thrown in for some variety. She enjoys working with CEOs, boards and other leaders in associations, research centres, charities and universities. In this conversation, we discuss her work with social media and how she prepares and plans for upcoming facilitated events. Mel was also lucky enough to attend Social Media Marketing World. She's been a few times. She went earlier this year and she shares what she learnt from that as well. We again discuss video. You just can't escape the conversation around video these days. And we also throw down a challenge. So if you're listening and on Instagram, would love to see you respond to that challenge. You'll hear a bit more about the details on that through the conversation. Finally, if you've been listening in the last month or so, you would have noticed that I've been talking about how I want to hear your ideas on how you have used dice in your workshop. So I'm actually going to use some dice this week in a strategy session, and I'll share that game that I'm playing as part of the online PDF that I'm creating and releasing later this year, which is a compilation of a ton of different activities that you can use in your workshops, which incorporate dice and throwing the dice. So if you have any cool activities, I would love to hear them. Visit firsttimefacilitator.com/dice to submit those. If you'd like to continue the conversation when the show is over, join our free Facebook group called The Flip Chart. And if you've got questions and comments for Mel Kettle, she's in that group as well. As always, you can view show notes for this episode and all the great work that Mel is doing by visiting firsttimefacilitator.com/episode 68. Now, on to the show. I would like to welcome to the First Time Facilitator podcast, Mel Kettle, where, as you can see, we're both in Brisbane at Mel's co-working space. So, Mel, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much, Leanne. Great to be here.
Great to have you here. And we've spoken about this for quite some time. I think when we first met down at the awesome Howard Smith Wharves.
I know. That was great. That was such a fun night. And yes, we did talk about it then.
It was. And I think I really had an instant, I really sort of felt gravitated towards you because of all the work that you do. And we had a really great conversation. There were probably like 30 other people there that I didn't get to meet that night because I was all just talking to Mel.
Same. I think I spoke to one other person after you left.
Oh.
Because you'd left. And then I'm like, not much fun now. Yeah.
So really, this is just an excuse for Mel and I to catch up, but not really. I'd love for you to share. I mean, you do some really interesting work, and I think different sides of it will definitely appeal to our facilitators. So can you just share with our listeners what your background is or what you do now and how you sort of navigated your way to where you are?
So my background is varied. My first job when I finished uni was running conferences and events for a small conference management company, and then I worked for a larger conference management company and ran all the events for Microsoft for a year. So in a year, my team of six including me, ran 300 events. So we all nearly had a nervous breakdown. I'm just currently writing a blog post about the importance of saying no, and that was a time I definitely should have said no before I said yes to that job.
So is that like one or two big events every week? Or
a lot of the events were small. So we did 2 massive events every year, and the rest of them were varying sizes from breakfast up to a one-day sort of whatever kind of event that might have been. But one of the things we did was we did a 17-city roadshow 3 times a year. And so I had one team member solely on that, and she was the queen of spreadsheets, and she was amazing. And then the rest of us did everything else, and it was crazy. The person who negotiated the contract for my company negotiated an awesome contract for Microsoft, but didn't work for them, and she'd never run an event, and so she didn't know what was involved. But that year taught me how to be really organised, how to be really methodical, and I was fairly organised anyway, but it just gave me some really good skills. And the other thing that it led to was great friendships with some amazing people who I'm still in touch with 25 years later. Yep.
That's great. Bonded over that pressure.
We bonded over a lot of alcohol a couple of times a week.
Fantastic. So then, I mean, that year would have been crazy. So what happened? Did you shift careers following that, or did you think, I love events, I'm going to keep going? What occurred?
No, I almost had a nervous breakdown, and my stress levels were through the roof. So my blood pressure was sky high. I was having chest pains all the time. And my doctor said to me, if you don't make a major life change, you'll have a stroke by the time you're 30. And I was turning 30 3 months after he told me that. And so I quit my job, moved to Brisbane, ditched the boyfriend, cut all my hair off, and turned 30, all in about the space of 2 weeks. And I have never looked back.
And were your friends and family supportive of that move, or were they thinking, hey, you've got this great job, what are you thinking? Or could they tell that you were quiet?
It was a bit mixed. So I lived in a different city to most of my family, and they didn't fully realise the extent of how unwell I was. And I hadn't either, to be honest. You think you're invincible when you're in your 20s. So when I said I was moving to Brisbane, my father was supportive, my mother was not. And then I said to Mum, I was thinking I could maybe move back to Vancouver because I'd lived there before I moved to Sydney. And she said, Brisbane's great. We love Brisbane. Go to Brisbane.
So that door in the face theory. It's just ask something so extravagant and you get what you really want, which isn't too much anyway.
That's it. Yeah. So that was nearly 20 years ago. I can't believe it's been that long. And I was planning on taking a bit of time off and was offered a great job as the marketing manager of the Brisbane Festival the day I landed in Brisbane. So obviously said yes to that and loved it. Met great people again, made friends and still hang out with frequently. And just learned a lot about Brisbane, the arts industry. Yeah, learned a lot professionally as well. So from that I went to work for the state government for about 5.5 years. And then I went out on my own 12 years ago, nearly 13 years ago. Had enough of working for other people and thought, time to do my own thing. And again, kind of quit on a whim and have never looked back.
Good on you. Congratulations. It's reassuring hearing that from someone that's only 2 months out of corporate and you're 13 years in and you seem very happy and very successful with the way that things are going.
Yeah, I love it. Flexibility is just fabulous. So, you choose when you work. I'm really fortunate now I choose who I work with. If there's people who approach me and I get a bad feeling or I just don't want to, for whatever reason, I can say no.
Yeah, so we look forward to reading that blog post on how to say no. So let's talk about the work that you're doing now. What kind of work are you doing in terms of your social media and also the workshops that you facilitate?
So I do a lot of work to work with CEOs, leadership teams and organisations to help them become more connected and to help them understand how to connect, communicate and collaborate. And a lot of that is through using digital and social media, but a lot of that's using non-traditional forms of communication as well. So what are some of the skills you need? And I do that through facilitating. I do a lot of strategy days, facilitate quite a few strategy days, run some workshops, do some training. I do quite a bit of coaching and mentoring one-on-one, particularly with CEOs and leaders who are wanting to become more connectable and develop their personal brand. And that a lot of that's through using LinkedIn or through using video or just using internal communication tools such as Facebook Workplace or Yammer so that their people who work with them in their organisation can get a clearer understanding of who they work with, who they work for, what the company's values are, what their goals are, and what how their role plays a part in helping the organisation achieve its strategic intent.
Because we often talk about personal brands in the context of if you have your own business, it's really important to have a profile. I don't hear it so much in terms of within the organisation, or I don't hear organisations really preaching it for their people. I think we read on LinkedIn that it's important, but not from an entrepreneurial perspective. So what kind of work do you do when you go in? I know in your book I was reading at the Social Association, you talk about both strategic planning and strategic thinking. So how do you sort of help associations or companies promote the fact that personal branding is an important thing? And then secondly, I'll ask you about the strategy stuff.
Yeah, so I start at the top, because if it isn't led at the top, then why would anybody else do it, is often the attitude that I come across. So I try to get in with the CEO or somebody who's influential on the senior leadership team to help them understand the importance and relevance of communicating what the organisation is all about to the staff and to the volunteers within the organisation. Because the more they understand that, then the more they're going to feel engaged at work, the more they're going to be productive, and that has better results from a financial perspective and from whatever other metric it is that you might be measuring. And, you know, we know from research that Gallup does that engagement at work is about 13%.
Yeah, it's sad. It's a very sad stat.
Insanely low.
Yeah.
How can that not impact on productivity? So if your engagement in your workplace is 13%, even if it's 50%, that means that you're not having anywhere near as much productivity as you could, which means that your revenue is significantly lower than you would probably like it to be. So starting at the top and helping the leadership team become more connectable means that people are going to want to do more things for them, because when you feel connected to someone, you want to help them. And whether that help is just doing a better job of your paid job, or whether it's making a donation or volunteering or buying their product or using their service or writing a testimonial for them or telling your friends how great they are, when you feel connected, you do all of those things.
Yeah, you do. And in terms of even with influencing, I remember just reflecting on my last 2 months ago, which isn't that hard because it's not a distant memory, but working in a global organisation and trying to get help from people in other countries, it was super hard if you had not established the relationship. And I found that the best way to do it was, I think Jordan Harbinger talks about it, to dig the well before you get thirsty. So invest in the relationships and building those connections and some simple things. I love that you talk about non-traditional ways. So if you are visiting other countries, even taking a box of Tim Tams is quite useful, because then it just builds up that relationship.
And, you know, you mentioned my book. I've lost count of how many people I've given that to in the year that it's been out. And someone said to me the other day, how much money have you made from it? And I said, I didn't produce it to sell it. And yes, I've sold some copies, but you never make a fortune from selling a book at $30 a copy. It's the relationships that it creates by me giving it to people, and that spirit of generosity of saying, hey, this might be useful to you, with no expectation that you'll buy anything from me or use my services. And if you finish reading it, if you like it or you don't like it, give it away to somebody else. And just building relationships in that way.
Yeah, and I guess with the book, what I like about it is that it is workbook form. So at the end of every chapter, I love workbooks, obviously. That's why I'm in the facilitation game. But I love books where it's like theory, and then you can sort of write your own notes and make it yours. And we do have a lot of facilitators that do help out not-for-profits and associations as well. So you can quickly share what benefits there are from your book for non-profits.
Yeah, so my book is called The Social Association. I need to read the subtitle because I can never remember it. 5 key skills not-for-profits need to increase member engagement, generate return on investment, and create a thriving online community. So it basically talks about how you can build a social media presence or a digital presence online using social media. And the skills that I talk about are strategic thinking. How do you create a strategy? And how do you think strategically so that that is part of your normal day-to-day process? And then looking at how do you become customer service focused if you're a membership organisation or any other kind of organisation. How do you work across different generations? And what do they need? What are the different things that different generations want and need today? Because in the workforce, there's 5 generations that are working now.
I know it's at Generation Z was in there. I didn't even consider them.
I know. And Generation Alpha.
What's that?
Generation Alpha is the next one. So children born in 2010 and onwards. So my nephew is almost Generation Z. He was born in 2008. But again, they're very different in how they've grown up. Like, he knew how to use my iPad to download a game when he was 1.
That's not in any sort of curriculum
insane.
or any
No, it's not.
Parenting guide?
No, it's not. And then the third skill I talk about is how to have a creative mindset, because everybody's creative, but a lot of people don't believe they are. but everybody has some creativity in them. So how do you capture that, and how do you incorporate that in the communication methods that you use? And then how do we do it in a way that saves us time and money? So what do we need to do in terms of being organised? And then the last one is how to analyse. What do you measure? Because everything that you do from social media perspective, but everything you do in business should be measured in some way, and not necessarily just measuring numbers, but how do you measure attitudes and reactions? And one of the things that I'm talking to one of my clients about at the moment is they work in the drug and alcohol sector, and there's a real stigma around addiction. How are they going to measure that shift away from that stigma so that addiction is accepted and believed to be a health issue and not a social issue? And how do you measure that?
How do you measure a mindset
How do you measure
change?
that? Exactly.
Because it's not something that happens like you wake up one morning and think, oh yeah, I'm going to think differently now.
But one of the ways you can measure it is what's the attitude of the media? How does the media talk about stigma and alcoholism and addiction? What are the words that they use around it? And it's very similar to, stigma around women. There's a lot of articles in the paper about men who murder their wives. Oh, he was such a nice guy. Hello, he just murdered his wife. What's nice about that? So how do we measure that?
And it's interesting with language and things like that. We don't even realise when we're reading that we're absorbing that and taking that on ourselves in terms of our mindset and our approach to things. So it's really hard to put up barriers.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I talk a lot about that. But the book, I wrote it for associations because that's who I was doing a lot of work with at the time. But people who've read it who are from small business or corporates or other organisations have said it's really useful for them as well.
Yeah, that's great. So let's talk about your work with not-for-profits, and you've been asked to come in and help with their strategic planning. What are some things that you do, say, to prepare for that workshop, but also when you get in there and you're helping them plan?
So I'm a big questioner, ask lots and lots of questions. Anyone who's read Gretchen Rubin's book about the 4 tendencies will be familiar with the questioner tendency. So I ask heaps and heaps of questions so I can get a clear understanding of who the organisation is, what they want to achieve from their planning day, who's going to be there, any issues or challenges that I need to be aware of. I always ask them for any research they've done, any outcomes or anything that is going to have an impact that may or may not be relevant. It helps me feel more prepared for the day. And then together we'll develop an agenda that helps them feel that they're going to get the most out of their day. But yeah, lots of questions. That's probably the short-term answer. The easiest
Prevention's
answer.
better than cure.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I hear that so often, and at the same time, then you do sometimes see, and even I can be accused of accusing myself of not doing that preparation, not being as thorough, and you're like, I need to remember that for next time, and every time is an opportunity to improve. Just on the terms of outcomes, I'd love to find out from you, is the outcome always we want to walk away with a strategic plan, or is it, or we just need to work through an issue, or what kind of outcomes do you hear from clients?
It depends. So I've done a couple recently where they just wanted to get a better understanding of how as an organisation they could use social media. So the outcome was a high-level social media strategy.
Right, yeah.
Sometimes it's a high-level content strategy. So they come away with 6-month editorial calendar that spells out what they're going to talk about in all of their communication content over the next 6 months. Sometimes it's a particular issue around finance, or it might be a particular issue around the relationships within the organisation, or it might be just a new board that they want to get to know, and where the board and the executive need to start to work together. So there's lots of different things. Sometimes it is a whole strategy, which is really hard to do in a day.
It is, isn't it? It's very ambitious.
It is very ambitious. Somebody in your Facebook group said that she's a more is more kind of girl, and I thought, oh yeah, me too. And that bit me in the bum in a big way the other day with the facilitation that I did. I tried to squash a full day's worth of work into half a day, and then I had 2.5 hours because the rest of the day went over, and it was a nightmare. Nobody was happy at the end of it.
That's so tough, isn't it?
It was.
Because you want to give as much information and value, right?
Yeah, and I learned a lot from that. And one of the things I learned was the next time that happens, because I'm sure it will, is I need to say to my client, what agenda items are we going to remove? Because we can't do them all. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or what's your key priority, because we've lost half of our time. Yeah.
And it is quite difficult because you're being paid to deliver something. So, I guess what I would be facing is I want to do everything I can. I'd be like, yes, we can do that. Yes, because you're paying me to do that. I'm sure I can do it.
Exactly.
Yeah, so it comes from just being...
was definitely like that. Yeah, definitely.
I want this client so bad that I'll do anything.
Yeah, it was just a challenge. Lots of other things were challenging as well about that session, but it's done now.
Yeah, well, and thank you. I mean, because it's a lesson learnt for you, but also by you sharing it with us on this show, only reinforces to our listeners that if they are getting a niggling feeling about a gender or something coming up, they're not quite sure about, to have that conversation.
Yep. And be honest.
Yeah.
And sometimes it might even mean, and this hasn't happened to me, but sometimes it might even mean stepping away and saying, you know what, I know it's in a couple of weeks, but I've realised I might not be the best person for you. Can we talk about that?
Yeah. And that's why it's great to also have a network of people that you can go ring up and go, hey, Mel, you're the social media person. This is what they want. Can you step in for this?
Yeah. But what was really frustrating, a friend of mine just wrote this amazing book called Nimble, which is how to be more nimble when you're facilitating when things go wrong. And I had just read it and I couldn't remember any of it.
That sounds like an amazing book. So
it is an amazing book. I meant to bring it to lend it to you, but I forgot, so I'll pop it over another time.
Okay, we'll have to chat
it's
to
fantastic.
Who's the author?
Her name's Rebecca Southerns.
Okay.
And she's a facilitator in Toronto, or just out of Toronto in Canada, and she's fantastic.
Yeah, because that's the key. I mean, because it's such a varied job, like you said, like every workshop can be different.
Yeah.
Okay, so on the day of the workshop, what kind of things do you do? Do you have like a special morning routine to prepare? Do you go through your notes? Is there anything unique that you do to prepare for a workshop?
Not really. It depends a lot on whether it's in Brisbane or whether I'm travelling for it as well. But I always try to have a good breakfast and get a bit of fresh air. So I don't normally go for a walk or exercise on the morning of a facilitation unless it's later in the day. But I will at least sit on the back deck or make sure that there's at least 5 minutes in the sunshine just to get that bit of freshness. Always have a good breakfast, double check what I've got, try to iron my dress the night before.
It's one of my rules.
I just listened to that one.
Yeah.
Had a good laugh.
Have you been stung by that before?
No, I haven't.
Good.
I actually mostly have non-iron clothing.
Hey, that's a good hack, yeah.
But just try to get into the right mental state as well. So one of the things I have just started doing is turning off my phone for a facilitation. So putting it in flight mode about an hour before, once I've arrived at the venue and I've talked to the client so he or she knows I'm there and that I'm good to go, try to put my phone into flight mode so I don't have any interruptions over the course of the day, because there's nothing worse than checking your email or checking Facebook 5 minutes before, speaking at a conference or facilitating a day and seeing something that causes an emotion that you don't need to have.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah.
Never even thought of that. And it has happened to me. Yeah, even if it's just checking something on Instagram where you get an email and it's like, I've got to do, even if it's like something simple like I've got to do that, I've got to remind myself to do it when I get home, but then it just interferes with that focus.
Exactly. And particularly if it's another client who's asking for something or wants something or is happy or unhappy about something, it gets you out of the focus of that client that has paid you for that day, to be there for that day for them. I've done that a few times in the last few months and it's made a really big difference.
Cool.
And then I've not turned my phone back on again until I've left the venue. And so don't be tempted to turn it on at lunchtime.
And then you'd have Mel, you'd have 17 notifications on every different social app, I'd imagine.
Well,
you want to catch up.
Have all of my notifications turned off except text message, WhatsApp and Facebook Messenger. And so I don't see any of them unless I log into the app.
I find that really interesting. A lot of the social media people I talk to actually don't get their notifications and they are very disciplined about checking their social media like for 30 minutes every day. You'd expect someone in social media to say, I'm on it 24/7 responding and commenting, but I'm finding it's the opposite.
Yeah, I check it a lot more than I probably need to, than I definitely need to. But I've never had notifications turned on right from when I first got my first smartphone about, 10 or 12 years ago. The little red light on my BlackBerry just about drove me insane. So once I'd worked out how to turn it off, it never went back on again.
Fantastic. Now, on the topic of social media, I mean, the whole podcast is really about that, but you recently returned from social media marketing world.
I did.
Where's that held? San Diego?
It's San Diego.
Yeah. Could you share with our listeners a bit about what you learnt at that conference, why you love it? You've been there quite a few times.
Yeah, this was my 4th year and it was amazing as always. I go for the people because it's all online and so you can buy a virtual ticket to listen to all the recordings. but I make the trek over every year to just catch up with the people I've met and to meet new people and to just build relationships. There were 3 big things this year. The first was be more human. We do business with people and we need to forget about the B2B, B2C and just focus on the person to person, human to human, and how do we show our humanity in all of our dealings. And that was great for me because my whole lens of life is how to become more connected. And so showing that human side is something I've always just talked about and shared and taught all of my clients. So it was really refreshing to see gung-ho social media people talk about that as well. And the second thing that they talked about, which again is something I've always drilled down on and to a lot of derision in some circles, is that we need to focus on the quality, not the quantity of the relationships that we have. So, no, sorry, the quality. Focus on the quality. Oh my God, I've done so many statistics subjects at university and I always get those mixed up still.
You're showing the human side, Mel.
So look at what's the quality of the people. It doesn't matter if you've got 50,000 likes on Facebook or Twitter followers or connections on Instagram or LinkedIn if you don't actually have good relationships with them and if they're not engaging with you. Far better to have 50 people who know you and love you and who will do things for you, even if that's just telling their friends or liking, commenting and sharing your content, than it is to have 20,000 who do nothing. And then the third was use video. Video, so hello video camera. Video is growing and growing and growing. LinkedIn Live is about to be launched globally. It's being beta tested at the moment and there was some really interesting sessions from a couple of speakers at the conference who have LinkedIn Live.
Yeah.
So they were the 3 big things. Be more human, focus on quality, not numbers, don't get hung up on the vanity metrics and use video more, a lot more.
Yeah, so those listening on the podcast, we're actually got an iPhone here that's just filming the conversation because Mel, she came back and she did some posts on what she learnt, and like I said in Julian Mather interview as well and what he said, this video is just growing. So we just, over LinkedIn, I think, we just commented on Julian's episode, said, how do you feel about filming this, Mel? And we don't know what we'll do with the video, but we've got it. So we'll see. On the concept of LinkedIn Live, is it just very similar to Facebook Live?
Exactly the same context as Facebook Live, so and YouTube Live and IGTV where you could use live as well. Live video is where it's at. It's really hard to hide behind a live selfie video and live video in general. Things go wrong and it's a great way of showing your human side and showing how connectable you are. And it's a great way to show your authentic self, which is a much misused phrase, but I just think live video is absolutely fantastic because there is nowhere to hide. And, you know, whenever I do pre-recorded video, it's one take and I'm done because I never have the time or the inclination to do it again unless there's a technical fail, in which case I'll just swear a few times and then redo it.
Edit that bit out.
But I really believe that people don't expect perfection and they want to see the real you. And so the more you can show that, and live video is an amazing way of showing your true self.
And I think just on that note, with the process of me doing this podcast and interviewing people, I have listened to it and I've refined certain things. So I'm hoping the interviews today are probably better than what they were at the beginning. And I'm imagining with LinkedIn and Facebook Live videos, it's probably a really great practice for facilitators because if you're having to go live and just talk into it, you're building your skills and being able to stand in front of people and improvise.
Absolutely.
So it's probably a really great tool for all of us to, and I'm saying that, but I freak out with the idea of doing it.
And I'm not saying that you can't be prepared. You can do a live video and have notes and refer back to them, but don't read something verbatim, just make some dot points and just have, like I know some people who do live video who have one message they want to get across per video and it might only go for a minute and that's enough. Don't feel that a live video or any video needs to go for 30 minutes or 40 minutes or 60 minutes. Just keep it succinct and speak for as long as you need to get your message across and provide value. And whether it's 30 seconds or 30 minutes, if it's useful and helping serve the person you're talking to, they will listen till the end.
Thank you. And what's your Instagram handle, Mel?
Mel Kettle. Everything is at Mel Kettle.
Okay, I'm at Leanne Hughes and same with that Instagram. But if you're listening in, Throwing down a bit of a challenge. Just if you're listening in, stop what you're doing right now. Hopefully you're not driving. If you're running, stop. But just get onto Instagram, start just doing a live and tag Mel Kettle and me, Leanne Hughes. Would love to see your videos.
Absolutely.
We'll send you something if you do that. So just throwing down a challenge.
Ooh,
might get
love it.
0, we might get 10, we might get 50. Love to see your live video.
I'd love to see video on LinkedIn as well. Connect with me. I'm Mel Kettle on LinkedIn. And LinkedIn is where it's at. If you're working in, like most of us who facilitate our clients are businesses, we're hired by businesses and by whether it's corporate or small business or whoever it is, LinkedIn is where we need to be playing in terms of building relationships with the people who will buy us. And so do some video on LinkedIn, and it can be a pre-record. It doesn't need to be, it can't be live unless you're one of the lucky few. And there's not many of us, if any of us, in Australia. I think they're just rolling it out in the US to begin with. So do some video on LinkedIn and share that as well with Leanne and I.
Yeah, and we'll definitely take us and we'll applaud you, we'll comment, we'll do our best to support you if you do take it up.
Yeah.
Is LinkedIn your preference platform of choice?
Yeah.
How often do you interact on that platform?
I try and do something every day, but I don't post every day. I probably post 2 or 3 times a week, but have conversations every day, connect with new people most days and learn from it every day. I spend way too much time on LinkedIn. LinkedIn's my new Facebook.
Me too. I check LinkedIn before Facebook.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
Confession.
Yeah, I don't use Facebook for business anymore at all, except for a few groups yours and a couple of others.
Yeah.
But I just find LinkedIn for me is far more effective at strengthening the relationships with people who I'd like to work with.
Fantastic.
And Twitter as well.
Yeah.
I love Twitter. I've been on Twitter for 10 years.
I don't like Twitter.
I love everything about it. It's for a few years, every piece of business I had came from Twitter.
Wow. I've never heard that.
Yeah. This was a while ago, a few years ago, like probably 2010, 11 and 12.
Yeah.
Maybe everything I did was from Twitter.
And do you think it's sort of shifting now more into LinkedIn?
Much more into LinkedIn now.
Okay, good. So I don't
Much
need
more
to
into
start loving
LinkedIn.
Twitter?
No.
Okay,
No.
great.
I think Instagram has taken over from Twitter a little bit in terms of building relationships with people.
That visual content, it's magic.
It is.
So just to wrap this up, think about Mel, let's think about you when you were running those events for Microsoft and even like your career progression in terms of facilitating workshops. So from an event side, what would you want from someone coming in to facilitate, or what's your advice for someone that's new to facilitation?
For me, I need to have a really clear understanding of what the client wants, and that holds true for all client work. It doesn't matter whether it's me speaking at a conference, running a coaching session or a coaching program or a mentoring program or facilitating. The first question I ask is, what do you want to get out of this? Like, I'm a big believer in Stephen Covey's begin with the end in mind, and that is pretty much how I live my whole life with everything I do. What do I want to get out of it at the end?
That's great.
And I remember my first date with my now husband. I said to him,
"Were you getting married?"
I said to him, "Do you want more children?" Because he had one child. And he said, "You can't ask me that on a first date." And I said, "Yes, I can, because I don't want any. And if you want 6, we won't be having date number 2.
Good on you for having such clear criteria.
Oh, it was very clear. Yeah.
And I do have to say this, but you mentioned at the beginning of the podcast when you worked with Microsoft, you became very organised and meticulous. And in our interactions, I've noticed that. So I'll send you an email and you'll follow up straight with a calendar appointment. Like your turnaround time and precision, it's pretty amazing. Like you can cut out a lot of that back and forth with the way that you operate. Do you have any sort of systems or tools? Like how are you so responsive and organised?
My favourite tool is Calendly. I'm holding off getting a virtual assistant because I don't want to have to take the time to train someone, and because I like to hold on to things for way too long. But Calendly is an amazing tool, and that books all of my calendar appointments. So I'm going to Sydney later this week and I've got a day and a half unexpectedly free. So I've just set up a Calendly event where people who are in Sydney can meet up with me, and so I can just send them the link and say, I've got some time on Wednesday afternoon and all day Friday. Here's the link. Here's where I'll be. If you'd like to meet up, book in a time. And then that's blocked out for other people. And that just saves so much time in terms of toing and froing.
Yeah,
Brilliant.
Are you free 3 p.m? No, I'm not. Are you free to? Yeah, this
Yeah.
stops that.
Yeah, so I can send it to clients and say, this is when I'm available. you look at all of your diaries and let me know a time, and you don't have to book it in through Calendly. You can email me or you can just send me a calendar appointment from your system, but this will give you an indication of when I'm around and available and when I'm not. And you can set it up for different things. So I can set it up for a 15-minute quick chat or a 30-minute meeting or a 55-minute pre-strategy session meeting.
Yeah.
Or if you're in Brisbane and you want to meet me at WeWork, then you can use this one. And I just love it.
I love it too. And I only use it for podcast interviews, but I think I need to expand it, pay the money, upgrade. And
it's $10 a month.
Yeah.
It's not expensive. $10 US, so what, $13 or $14.
even if you had one interaction that saved you that process of emailing back and forth, it's already saved you money.
If you look at what your day rate is that you want it to be, and then you work out how many dollars a minute is that.
Yeah.
And it normally takes at least 10 minutes of time in emailing back and forth, if
and then
not more.
Not emailing them straight away, forgetting, I need to do that. And then, cool, great hack.
Yeah.
Mel, so we know where people can find you on Instagram and Twitter. If they want to contact you on LinkedIn or find your website and everything else that you do, where can they find you?
melkettle.com. Very easy.
Is there no other Mel Kettle in the world?
Funnily enough, there are two others that I know of. They both work in comms and PR. One of them's a man in the UK. And I got a Google alert and I'm looking at it going, I don't remember saying any of that. And then I saw his photo with Mel Kettle underneath and I went, no wonder, it's not me, it's this dude.
That's great. And also a good tip that you've got a Google alert for your own name
Absolutely.
as well. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Highly recommend that. They're not that effective compared to how they used to be, but it's just some little things every now and then pop up that surprise you.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, in a good way.
Hopefully this podcast will.
Hope so too.
It's been awesome having you on the show, and I'm glad that we got the excuse to catch up again.
Me too.
And
Thanks
I
so
hope
much.
I hope that not in 12, 13 years, maybe in 6 months' time, as organised as you are, and I'm using the right systems and incorporating some of the stuff that you spoke about, turning off all the distractions and notifications. I think that's very helpful. So thank you so much for being a guest.
Hey, thanks so much for sticking around. You've reached the end of another episode of the First Time Facilitator podcast. Connect with the show at firsttimefacilitator.com or follow me on Instagram at Leanne Hughes to find out what I'm up to during the week. If you enjoyed this episode, please feel free to share it with someone who will also appreciate the insight. And make it easier for yourself and subscribe to the show in your podcast player of choice. Thank you so much for listening, and chat to you next week.